morning, everybody. And howdy, as we would say where I'm from. My name is Wintermute. I'm super honored to be here with y'all today in Greece. This has been such a fun opportunity. And basically today I'm going to talk with y'all a little bit about this project that Dr. Robert Strong and I did together about sociohorticulture projects and how we can make them reusable for teachers. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit more later. So our main objectives really were to kind of identify any existing procedures or precedents for kind of horticultural programming in this area. A lot of the populations are pretty specific for this area, so that was our number one objective. And then number two, kind of investigate the effectiveness of these things and if we can apply them to a reusable context. So really the guiding question was, A, we know that sociohorticulture has been proven in literature to be an asset to people, and so if we can find out if it's an asset to secondary school students, and if so, how can we make that easily adaptable to teachers? So our conceptual framework really kind of revolved around Rogers' diffusion of innovation, and we paid particular attention to kind of the relative advantage, compatibility, complexity, those kind of areas, just so we could really see if this was going to be something that teachers can use and that students can benefit from. We did a qualitative systematic review for this, and we were kind of specific about what we included and what we did not include. So for this, we wanted it to be very current, so we limited it to the last 10 years of the literature. Because this is kind of an emerging field, there is a lot of precedents and data out there, but it's something that is literally being researched every day in the body of knowledge community. So we really wanted to honor that and make sure that it was current. So the other things that we included were keywords to make sure that kind of our specific interests popped up in our searches. And so those, of course, were socio-horticulture, horticultural therapy, mental health, and of course, horticultural programming as well. And I will also explain those a little bit more later. And really, this was a really cool idea to do it this way because for us, it gave us the opportunity to kind of look at this from an unbiased point of view. You know, as a master's student, contrary to many of my peers' beliefs, we do not know everything. I know, it's crazy. But I think that was a really cool perspective to come from because then we have really open minds and we just want to understand the body of knowledge here and better contribute to kind of the future. So now that I've talked to you all about that, what is a reusable learning project or object? And basically it's any type of pre-packaged material that can be reused. And that can include anything from a YouTube video, a podcast. Really the sky is the limit, especially with online learning, e-learning. Many of us in this room had to navigate that with COVID-19. So it's a really interesting object that has a lot of applications. Sorry, could you go back? And it's very predominant in e-learning, but also I wanted to put up there, and I can of course share this with everybody. There's actually a database for reusable learning objects, and that was something that I came across in this review and study and everything that I thought might be helpful. I know y'all probably would have wanted that when everybody said, okay, go online, but still, you know, super helpful, and it's just a really good tool for teachers so that the burden is less on them, and they get to focus more on student well-being. So the next one, the big long one, is sociohorticulture. It is a mouthful, but I promise it's very simple. Basically, it just means the interaction between people and plant or plant material. And so this is a really wide topic. It's a really big umbrella. There's so many things that go under it. This can be anything from, you know, helping your grandparents in the garden to, you know, walking in a florist shop or even just sitting in a room with a plant. Believe it or not, it does affect you on a physical level. So it's super cool. There's so many numerous documented benefits of this. Decreased stress levels, including like the stress hormone cortisol, have been proven to decrease. Blood pressure decreases. You feel rejuvenated, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but it's one of the major tenets of this is the restorative value of nature. And sure we're lacking the resources and access to be a part of the solution. But there are studies that show that they really do care about their students and we want to be part, just not sure how. So this would be a great way for us to step in and help them there. And also that RLOs really can help teacher learning, particularly with sociohorticulture because it is a relatively new field. So it could be a great way to add to the body of knowledge without being time-consuming and adding burden on teachers. Obviously, more research is needed, and super interested in looking more into that. But particularly, we kind of think that some support would be needed in the implementation part of this process, just because of those reports of teachers saying, like, I really want to help, but I just don't know how, or I really want to help, but my plate is so full. So that's really kind of what we came up with overall. So thank you all so much for your time and attention. If you have any questions now or later, please ask them. Our emails are up there. I'm happy to share with everybody anything that you need, and then I've also got references that I'm happy to share.
That's good, Emily. And so I ran into something similar to this when I was in Uganda. There was a group of HIV positive women there that were kind of gardening, and they were also having like facilitated group discussions. Is that typically how this works, or can you kind of just break down like how you facilitate horticulture therapy, I guess?
Right. So it would depend definitely on what exactly you would want to do. So in horticulture therapy specifically, that's kind of a subset of sociohorticulture in which there's a lot of emphasis on kind of doing a thing and reflecting and how did this make me feel, and from a mental health aspect, kind of working through whatever it is that you're trying to fix. Excuse me. And also, there's a lot of certifications. I know in our extension building, there's actually several people that are certified in horticultural therapy and are kind of innovating that field. So yeah, it's going to be super interesting to see how that develops over the next couple of years because it is relatively new, but the research really is behind it. It just is important. But it just kind of depends exactly on what you're trying to do with people. But yeah, it's definitely a part.
When you say sociocultural horticulture, you're saying kind of having an experience with horticulture to raise your mood or something like that?
Yes.
Okay,
Correct.
awesome. I just wanted to make sure we're all clear on the terminology. Awesome. Any questions? Great presentation again. Yeah.
Yes, Emily. So for presentation, I was wondering, you mentioned the literature mainly focused or described the impact of social horticulture upon elementary and middle school, and so how do you think this could be better applied to potentially high school students?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, honestly, research is probably the best way to figure that out because developmentally, high school students and primary students are very different. So, I was both at one time, and I know we all were, but, it's a very different mindset. And it might be interesting to see the kind of approaches that work better with primary students and work better with high school students. So, for example, a lot of the primary programming is in actual hands-on. So the kids are learning, biology, tactile engagement, things like that. So it's a very multifaceted thing. My guess would be that for high school students, it would be a little bit more focused on more passive interactions with plants. So like having a plant in your room as you're studying, or maybe having, a class garden of some kind that is a little bit less of a structured thing might be helpful just because, high school students have so much structure in their lives that might be helpful. But that's a really good question, and I'd be curious to see definitely where that leads.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering that if throughout the literature you've seen and you have noticed something or any difference between urban or rural areas or perhaps the international settings.
Right, okay. So that's a really good question as well. So in general, from what I found in my own experience as well, it just seems like when it comes to rural areas, access to horticulture is a lot easier. So there's a thing called plant blindness. And so what that kind of entails is that you tend to block out the plants around you, but you're still getting benefits from them. So I think that's a little bit more prevalent in the rural areas. In the urban raised beds, and, because it is expensive, unfortunately. So I think that's a really good point, is that, we need to make sure as researchers that we're trying to apply this unilaterally and not just making it to people that already have access to it. So, thank you for your question.
Any other questions? I have one. So, like, what is the certification process like for some of these extension program people that have this opportunity to do that? Because I know getting into mental health can sometimes be, like facilitating that, saying that you want to do that are complicated to be able to do that. When you're dealing with people with some very serious problems.
Right, you're right. And it is a very complex issue. To be honest, I don't know of any specific one path. So I work for a family and community health sector of extension, and we actually do work with Texans with disabilities. And so part of what we do is we work with the HOPS program, which is a program that helps Texans with disabilities get employment in the horticultural industry. And so when it comes to things like that, the certification process is very specific. So what I've found is basically it's all being done through very specific programs that have very specific paths to kind of being prepared to serve. But I haven't found a specific, accreditation that's like, okay, you're ready to go. It's just kind of on a case-by-case basis. But that's a really interesting point, because I think that could be helpful in the application of this. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see for sure.
Any other questions?